Marcus Thompson was the wealthiest widower in London, but also the most desperate. His 3-year-old twins, Emma and Sophie, hadn't slept through a single night since their mother died in an accident 8 months earlier. 17 nannies had already resigned. Their cries filled the Kensington mansion every night, and Marcus was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But when Eleanor Hayes, 26 years old, a graduate in child psychology with a secret hidden in her heart, crossed the threshold of that shattered home, she did something no nanny had ever tried before. She didn't attempt to stop the little girls from crying. Instead, she lay down beside them and began crying with them. What happened next changed the life of that broken family forever. This is the story of how love can heal even the deepest wounds. Marcus Thompson's mansion in Kensington was a living paradox. From the outside, it looked like every family's dream. 3 floors of Georgian white stone and grand windows that reflected the London sky. From the inside, it had become a hell of tears and despair. Marcus had built his property empire from the ground up, transforming every brick into gold through sacrifice and determination. But all the money in the world couldn't buy a single night's sleep for his twin daughters. Emma and Sophie, barely 3 years old, had become little ghosts wandering through the house with swollen eyes from crying and tiny hands always reaching for something that was no longer there. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when Eleanor Hayes climbed the steps of the mansion for the first time. Marcus accompanied her to the children's bedroom, his face marked by 8 months of sleepless nights. She was the 18th candidate, and he had no hope left. When they reached the nursery door, the familiar sound of sobbing greeted them like every night. The little girls had been crying since the day of Victoria's funeral, their mother. 8 months without a peaceful night. 8 months of nannies who surrendered to the impossibility of calming these 2 broken souls. Eleanor stopped in front of the door, listening carefully. These weren't tantrums. They were cries for help from 2 little girls who couldn't understand why their mummy wasn't coming home anymore. What happened next left Marcus speechless. Eleanor didn't approach the twin beds, didn't pick up the girls, didn't try to distract them. Instead, she removed her shoes, approached the larger bed in the corner of the room, the one where Victoria once slept when the girls were ill, and lay down on it. Then she began to cry. They weren't forced or theatrical tears. Eleanor was truly crying, with all her heart, letting her pain mix with that of the girls. The twins slowly stopped crying, intrigued by this woman who wasn't trying to silence them, but was sharing their pain. Emma, the braver one, approached first. With her little hands, she touched Eleanor's face, drying her tears as she had seen Mummy do. Sophie cuddled up on the other side, and without saying a word, fell asleep next to this stranger who had done the only right thing. For the first time in 8 months, the nursery filled with silence. Marcus remained in the doorway all night, contemplating the most beautiful and heartbreaking scene of his life. When dawn filtered through the pink curtains, he understood that Eleanor Hayes wasn't an ordinary nanny. She was the angel his family had been waiting for. The following days were a revelation for the Thompson family. Eleanor didn't seek to revolutionize everything overnight, but introduced small changes that seemed like daily magic. In the morning, she prepared breakfast while singing sweet melodies her mother had taught her, stories of brave princesses and gentle dragons. Marcus, accustomed to starting days with his daughter's tantrums, found himself witnessing scenes of family normality he had forgotten existed. Eleanor had a revolutionary approach. She didn't seek to erase the girl's pain, but confronted it directly. She had lost her own mother at 16 to cancer, just when she needed her most. Her father, destroyed by grief, had shut himself away, leaving her alone, with a mourning too heavy for her shoulders. In the afternoon, while the girls played in the mansion's garden, Eleanor told Marcus about her experience. She had spent years trying to be the perfect daughter so as not to cause her father more pain, But she had understood that denying grief didn't make it disappear. It transformed it into something bigger and darker. Marcus recognized his own experience in those words. He too had tried to be strong for the girls, to hide his tears, to pretend everything was all right. But the truth was that the house had become a museum of grief, where nobody dared mention Victoria for fear of making someone else cry. Eleanor explained that the girls needed to talk about Mummy, to know it was normal to miss her, that they could cry when they needed to, but also laugh, remembering the beautiful moments. That evening, for the first time in months, Marcus sat on the girls' bed for the bedtime story. But instead of reading a book, he began to tell them about when Victoria was pregnant, how she had painted the room hoping for 2 little girls, how she had sung to them when they were still in her womb. The girls listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word like thirsty sponges. When Marcus finished the story, Sophie asked if Mummy could see them from up there. Marcus found the courage to answer that yes, Mummy was always watching them and loved them very much. That night, for the second time in a row, the girls slept until morning, and for the first time in 8 months, Marcus also managed to rest, lulled by the feeling that perhaps his family was beginning to heal. Eleanor had brought to their home not only professional competence, but something more precious, the hope that one could be happy even after touching rock bottom of pain. The weeks passed, transforming the mansion from a museum of grief into a home where one could be sad without shame, but also happy without guilt. Eleanor had created what she called Mummy's Ritual. Every Sunday morning, they prepared flowers to take to the cemetery. It wasn't a gloomy moment, but one of celebration. They told Victoria about the beautiful things that had happened during the week, let her listen to new songs, showed her drawings made for her. The girls no longer cried during these encounters. They smiled, chatted, made the normal mischief of children who feel safe. One April morning, while Marcus worked in his study, he heard laughter coming from the garden. He looked out the window and saw Eleanor teaching the girls to do cartwheels on the lawn, her chestnut hair flying in the wind, her crystalline laughter mixing with that of the little ones. For a moment, the image took his breath away. Eleanor wasn't wearing a nanny's uniform or the professional attitude of previous candidates. She wore jeans and a sky blue blouse, and behaved like a big sister, an accomplice. Marcus shook his head, dismissing that dangerous thought. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. That evening, after putting the girls to bed, Marcus and Eleanor found themselves on the terrace in front of 2 steaming cups of tea. Marcus confessed he didn't know how to thank her for what she had done for them. Eleanor smiled, explaining she hadn't done anything special. She had only shown the girls that pain wasn't love's enemy. It had been a long time since Marcus had seen Emma and Sophie so serene, and he also slept better, knowing she was there. Eleanor blushed slightly, confessing that she too felt comfortable in that house. The girls were wonderful, and he was an extraordinary father. When Eleanor mentioned that Victoria had been right to fall in love with him, the name of the deceased wife fell between them like an invisible stone. Marcus felt that familiar punch to the stomach, but this time it was different. It wasn't pure pain. It was a complex mixture of nostalgia, gratitude, and guilt. Marcus confessed to feeling guilty for not being as sad as before, for smiling when he played with the girls, for feeling alive again. Eleanor placed her hand on his, explaining that Victoria wouldn't have wanted him to remain stuck in grief forever. Mothers want their families to be happy, even when they can no longer be physically present. At that moment, Marcus understood that Eleanor hadn't entered their lives only to heal the girls. She was there to heal him too, to teach him that one could love Victoria forever, and at the same time allow the heart to open again to hope. That night, staring at his bedroom ceiling, Marcus realized that the real miracle hadn't been just seeing his daughters smile again. The real miracle was noticing that his heart, too, had started beating again. May arrived bringing sense of wisteria and a lightness that the Thompson family hadn't breathed for almost a year. The girls were completely transformed. They laughed, played, even made the normal mischief that Marcus had learned to welcome as blessings. Eleanor had become an integral part of their routine. But Marcus began to notice small details that went beyond the professional relationship. The way she paused to look at him when she thought he wouldn't notice, how her eyes lit up when he entered the room, the smiles that lasted a second too long to be just politeness. One Sunday morning, while Eleanor helped the girls prepare flowers for Victoria, Marcus heard her humming a song he immediately recognized. It was Moon River by Audrey Hepburn, the song of their first dance as husband and wife. When Marcus pointed this out to her, Eleanor blushed, explaining it was one of her favorites. Marcus confessed it had been his and Victoria's song, but it didn't bother him to hear it sung again in that house. On the contrary, it was beautiful. Emma asked if Mummy also sang that song, and when Marcus confirmed it, Sophie suggested Eleanor sing it loudly so they could hear how Mummy sang. Eleanor sought Marcus's permission with her eyes. He nodded, and she began to sing with her sweet and warm voice. When Eleanor finished, Emma asked Daddy to sing too. Marcus began with an uncertain voice, then increasingly confident, and Eleanor joined him, creating a perfect harmony that filled the kitchen with new magic. The girls laughed and sang, mangling the words but not the emotion. At that moment, Marcus realized they were creating a new and precious memory, which didn't erase those with Victoria, but placed itself beside them with respect and beauty. When the song ended, Marcus and Eleanor looked into each other's eyes with an intensity that spoke more than 1,000 words. It was then that Emma, with the typical seriousness of children, made an announcement that changed everything. She revealed that Eleanor cried secretly when she thought nobody could see her. Sophie confirmed, telling how she had seen her looking at their photos with tears different from the sad ones of before. When Marcus asked if it was true, Eleanor finally confessed the truth. She cried because she had realized she loved all three of them, but knew she shouldn't, knew she was only the nanny, knew they had already had their great love. Marcus took her face in his hands with infinite tenderness, stopping that flow of words. He told her she wasn't just his daughter's nanny, but the woman who had brought them back to life, the person who had transformed the house from a mausoleum into a home full of love. And he confessed that he too had fallen in love with her courage, her sweetness, the way she had embraced their pain without judging. The girls watched the scene with wide eyes. Then Emma asked if Eleanor would become their new mummy. Marcus and Eleanor burst into laughter through tears, the emotion too great to be contained. Marcus asked Eleanor if she wanted to try to build something beautiful together with them. Eleanor couldn't answer with words. She just nodded, then bent down to embrace the girls who threw themselves into her arms, laughing and crying with joy. Marcus enveloped all three in a collective embrace, his heart exploding with happiness. For the first time in a year, the future didn't frighten him. On the contrary, he couldn't wait to live it together with them. The summer months slipped by full of small daily joys that nobody in the Thompson family took for granted anymore. Eleanor was no longer the nanny, but the beating heart of a home that had found its rhythm again. Marcus had made their relationship official, with a delicacy that Eleanor had never experienced before. There had been no pressure or haste, only the natural evolution of a feeling that had grown day by day, nourished by simple gestures and moments of shared everyday life. The girls had welcomed the change with enthusiasm. Eleanor had explained to them with her usual honest approach that one can love more than one person in life, that love for Mummy Victoria would always remain intact, but that the heart is big enough to contain other special loves too.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
One late summer morning, while they were having breakfast on the terrace overlooking the London skyline, Sophie asked a direct question. When would Eleanor marry Daddy to officially become their mummy? The question came like that, without warning, In the middle of a normal breakfast, Marcus almost choked on his coffee, while Eleanor felt her heart beating faster. Both girls agreed. They wanted Eleanor to marry Daddy so they could all be together forever. Eleanor asked what Mummy Victoria would have thought, using the strategy that had always worked to address delicate topics. Emma, thoughtfully, concluded that Mummy would have been happy because she wanted them to be happy, and they were happy with Eleanor. That evening, after putting the girls to bed, Marcus and Eleanor found themselves again on the terrace. The atmosphere was different, charged with sweet tension and infinite possibilities. Marcus joked about receiving a marriage proposal from two happiness experts, then became serious. He got up from the armchair and knelt in front of Eleanor, taking her hands in his. He told her she was the most extraordinary woman he had ever met, that she had transformed a destroyed family into a family that knew how to love without fear, that he woke up every day grateful that she had entered their lives. Then he officially asked her to marry him, to become part of this crazy, wonderful family. Eleanor answered yes, through tears of joy, while from upstairs came the excited voices of Emma and Sophie, who had heard everything and were celebrating from their windows. Marcus took her in his arms and spun her around, laughing, while the girls shouted they were cupids, getting the word wrong but not the concept. That night, Eleanor stayed in the master bedroom for the first time. Being in Marcus's arms, feeling his regular breathing against her hair, was the strongest feeling of home she had ever experienced. Upon waking, they found Emma and Sophie sitting on the bed next to them, already dressed and ready to start the day, asking when they would have the party. Marcus and Eleanor looked at each other and burst into laughter. Their family wasn't conventional, but it was perfect as it was. They were four hearts that had learned that love never ends. It transforms and multiplies, creating space for new happiness without erasing past ones. Marcus and Eleanor's wedding was celebrated at the Kensington mansion, transformed into an enchanted garden. Eleanor had insisted on marrying at home, in the place where their love story had bloomed day by day. It wasn't a traditional wedding in many ways. The bridesmaids were Emma and Sophie, dressed in powder pink with flower crowns they had helped choose. Eleanor's bouquet included white daisies, Victoria's favorite flowers, as a way to honor the memory of Marcus's first wife. The most emotional moment came during the ceremony, when Emma raised her little hand declaring she had something to say. She announced in a solemn little voice that Mummy Victoria was happy, that she had told her the night before. Sophie added that Mummy had also said Eleanor should always bring flowers on Tuesdays, because those were her favorites. A moved murmur went through those present. Eleanor bent towards the girls and hugged them tight, promising they would always do it. The couple's kiss was welcomed with an explosion of applause and rose petals, while Emma and Sophie jumped, shouting they were now a real family. During the reception, Marcus gave a brief but intense speech. He told of when he lost Victoria and thought his life was over, how the girls didn't sleep, and he no longer knew how to be a father. Then Eleanor had arrived, who had taught them that pain isn't love's enemy, that one can honor those we've loved by allowing the heart to love again. Eleanor, moved, replied that they had saved her as much as she had tried to save them. She had learned that love isn't a limited resource that runs out, but a miracle that multiplies every time it's shared. The party continued until late into the night, with Emma and Sophie convincing all the adults present to dance their flower dance, a choreography invented in honor of Mummy Victoria. When the little ones finally fell asleep, exhausted by emotion, Marcus and Eleanor found themselves alone on the terrace where they had fallen in love. Marcus called her Mrs. Thompson, asking how she felt. Eleanor replied that she felt complete, for the first time in her life, completely in the right place. They embraced, looking at the stars above London, while from upstairs came the most beautiful sound in the world, the peaceful breathing of two little girls sleeping serenely. Finally sure, their family was safe. That night, Eleanor didn't cry. For the first time since losing her mother, she fell asleep with a smile, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful endings are actually new beginnings disguised as happiness. A year after the wedding, the Kensington mansion was unrecognizable compared to that silent and sad house Eleanor had found the first night. Laughter filled every corner. The girls' drawings decorated the walls, and every room told the story of a family that had learned to be happy without forgetting. Eleanor had kept all her promises. Every Tuesday, she brought fresh flowers to Victoria's grave, often accompanied by the girls who told the mummy in heaven about their adventures with the naturalness of those who had learned that love knows no boundaries between life and death. In that year, Eleanor had learned that honoring Victoria didn't mean living in her shadow, but carrying forward her dreams for the girls, integrating them with her own. She had created the Mummy's Memory Book with all the stories Marcus told, and had taught the girls the song Victoria sang when they were in her womb. During a November dinner, Marcus made an announcement that surprised everyone. He and Eleanor were thinking of expanding the family. The girls exploded in cries of joy that were probably heard throughout the neighborhood, asking if they could choose the future baby's name. Eleanor, her heart beating fast with emotion, confessed she had never desired anything more in her life. Being mother to Marcus's daughters had already been the greatest gift, but being able to give them a little brother or sister would be the fulfillment of a dream she didn't dare dream. 2 months later, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The announcement to the girls was a moment of pure magic. Emma and Sophie danced throughout the house singing, while Eleanor and Marcus watched them with hearts exploding with happiness. The Thompson family was no longer the broken one Eleanor had found that first night. It was something new, unique, perfect in its human imperfection. It was living proof that love can heal any wound, if only given time and trust. During pregnancy, Eleanor continued her weekly rituals at the cemetery, now with a growing belly, and 2 girls who talked to the future sibling about Mummy Victoria, who watched them from the stars. One day, Emma asked a question that moved everyone. Would the new baby ever know Mummy Victoria? Eleanor answered that no, he wouldn't see her with his eyes, but they would tell him so many stories about her that he would grow up knowing he had had 2 special mummies. Love in that family had never been lacking. It had simply multiplied, creating space for everyone without taking anything away from anyone. 9 months later, on a warm spring morning, Oliver Thompson was born. His first cries filled the London clinic, welcomed by the tears of joy of a family that had learned the true meaning of waiting and hope. Emma and Sophie, now 4.5 years old, welcomed their baby brother with a mixture of excitement and protection that moved everyone present. They had awaited this moment with children's impatience, but also with the wisdom of those who had learned early how precious family love is. Eleanor, still tired from childbirth but radiant, contemplated the scene from the hospital bed with shining eyes. Marcus held her hand, and in his gaze was all the love and gratitude that words couldn't express. When they returned home, Eleanor prepared for the first weekly cemetery visit with the new member. She had with her not only Emma, Sophie, and the usual flowers, but also little Oliver in his carry cot. As she placed the flowers on the grave, and the girls arranged drawings made specially for the occasion, Eleanor introduced Oliver to Victoria. She promised the child would grow up knowing how important she had been to this family, even though he had never seen her with his eyes. Emma spoke with the seriousness of a little adult, explaining that Oliver had never seen Mummy Victoria, but Eleanor had already told him many stories about her. Sophie added they would teach him the song she sang when they were little. At that moment, as if moved by a mysterious instinct, little Oliver opened his eyes for the first time since they'd arrived at the cemetery. His dark little eyes, identical to Marcus's, seemed to look towards the sky, as if he were really listening to something only he could hear. Eleanor felt a warm shiver down her back. At that moment, she had absolute certainty that Victoria was there with them, blessing this new life and this family that had managed to transform pain into multiplied love. Back home, Oliver fitted into the family like a missing piece nobody had noticed. No forcing had been necessary. It was natural, perfect. That evening, while putting Emma and Sophie to bed, the girls asked to hear the story of how they had become a family. Eleanor and Marcus began to tell. They spoke of Mummy Victoria, who had loved Daddy Marcus, and given them Emma and Sophie. How sad they had been when she went to heaven. How impossible it seemed to become happy again. Then they told of Eleanor's arrival, of that first night when she had cried with them, how they had learned one could be sad and happy at the same time. They spoke of the wedding, of Oliver's arrival, of how they were now a family of 5 people, plus a special mummy who watched them from the stars. Emma asked if they lived happily ever after. Eleanor gently corrected, they lived full of love, which is much better than happiness, because love never ends, not even on difficult days. That night, Eleanor cried for the last time in this story, but they were tears of pure gratitude for a life she would never have dared dream, for a family that had welcomed and transformed her. Marcus found her on the terrace with Oliver in her arms, while she looked at the stars above London. He asked what she was thinking. Eleanor replied that 3 years ago she was a lonely and sad girl who was afraid of never being enough for anyone. Now she was the happiest mother in the world. Marcus embraced her from behind, whispering he was the luckiest man in England and thanking her for saving his family, for teaching him to love again. From upstairs came Emma's voice, calling them because Oliver was crying. They looked at each other and burst into laughter. Real life, made of nappies to change and small daily dramas, was calling them. But they were ready to face it together, because they had learned that true love isn't that of fairy tales, but the kind that withstands storms and becomes stronger every day. The Thompson family's story wasn't finished. It had just begun. If Eleanor, Marcus, and their girl's story has moved you and made you believe again in love that heals, smash that like button with all your heart. Share this story to show that even from the most difficult situations, greater happiness can be born. Tell us in the comments, do you believe in love that comes when you no longer expect it? Have you seen blended families find happiness? Eleanor's story teaches us that true love doesn't replace, but adds, multiplying joy instead of dividing it. Subscribe right now and activate all notifications so you won't miss other incredible stories of families who found love again after touching rock bottom of pain. Ready for another story that will warm your heart? Click on any video on screen now and discover other extraordinary tales of second chances and love that conquers all.